I never believed dating apps were meant for real love. They were just something you opened late at night, when the apartment felt too quiet and your friends were all busy living their lives. That's why I swiped on Evan. No expectations. No dreams. Just boredom and bad wine. His profile was simple: brown eyes, a crooked smile, standing in front of a coffee shop in Seattle. I was in Austin, finishing my last semester of college, juggling a part-time job and a future I wasn't sure about. He messaged first. "So what's the story behind your smile?" It wasn't smooth. It wasn't clever. But it felt real. We started talking every day. About music. About how adulthood felt like a test no one studied for. About how lonely you can feel even when everything looks fine on the outside. Evan had this way of listening, really listening, even through a screen. Weeks passed. Then months. One night, during a video call, he said quietly, "I wish you were here right now." I laughed it off, my heart racing. Yeah, well, life doesn't work like that. But the truth was, I was already imagining what it would feel like if it did. I didn't know then that loving Evan would ask me to choose between the life I planned and the love I never expected. And the hardest part, this was only the beginning. By the time spring came, Evan felt less like someone I talked to online and more like someone who lived inside my daily routine. I'd wake up to his good morning texts before my alarm. He knew when I had exams and reminded me to breathe. I knew when he had late shifts at the startup he worked for, and I stayed up just to hear his voice afterward. Somehow, a man 2,000 miles away became the most consistent thing in my life. Still, we avoided calling it anything serious. One night, I finally asked, "What are we doing?" There was a pause. I could hear the rain tapping against his window in Seattle. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I don't want this to end." That scared me more than if he'd said he loved me, because endings were familiar. Hope wasn't. Graduation crept closer. Everyone around me talked about jobs, apartments, and staying in Texas. Evan talked about hikes, cold mornings, and coffee that actually tasted like something. It felt like we were standing on opposite sides of a map, tugging at the same invisible thread. Then he surprised me. "I found a cheap flight," he said one night, trying to sound casual. "I could come to Austin. Just for a weekend." My heart slammed into my ribs. "You'd really do that?" "I already bought the ticket." I smiled so hard my face hurt. But when the call ended, reality settled in. Because meeting him would make everything real. And once something becomes real, you can't pretend it doesn't matter anymore. I saw Evan before he saw me. He was standing near the baggage claim at Austin Bergstrom Airport, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, scanning the crowd like he wasn't sure I'd actually show up. He looked taller than on my screen. More real. My chest tightened in a way no emoji or late-night call had ever managed to do. When he turned and our eyes met, everything else blurred. We hugged. Awkward at first, then like we'd been waiting for it forever. He smelled like coffee and laundry detergent, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. "Hi," he said, smiling like this moment mattered as much to him as it did to me. That weekend felt unreal. We walked along Lady Bird Lake, shared tacos from a food truck, and laughed at how different we sounded in person. Sometimes we go quiet, just watching each other like we were memorizing details we didn't want to forget. On the last night, sitting on my couch, Evan reached for my hand. "This feels dangerous," he said softly. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Because I don't think I can go back to pretending you're just a voice on my phone." My throat tightened. I wanted to say something brave, something certain. Instead, I whispered, "Me neither." At the airport the next morning, he kissed my forehead before walking away. I stood there long after he disappeared, holding the echo of him like something fragile. Because love didn't scare me anymore. Distance did. After Evan left, my apartment felt too quiet. The couch where he'd sat still held his shape, like my life hadn't caught up to reality yet. We tried to slip back into our old routine. Texts, calls, video chats, but something had shifted. Now I knew how his laugh sounded in person. How warm his hands were. How hard it was to let go. Long-distance love is strange. You feel deeply connected and painfully far at the same time. We planned visits like lifelines. He came again in the summer. I flew to Seattle in the fall. I fell in love with the gray skies and the way he squeezed my hand when crossing the street like he was afraid of losing me in the crowd. But life didn't pause just because we wanted it to. I got a job offer in Dallas, good pay, real benefits, a smart next step. Evan's startup offered him a promotion that tied him tighter to Seattle. Suddenly, love wasn't just emotional anymore. It was logistical. "I don't want to hold you back," he said one night. "I don't want to resent you later," I replied. Neither of us meant goodbye, but neither of us said stay either. Sometimes, when I think about how fragile moments like these are, I realize why stories like this matter, to remind us we're not alone in choosing between love and timing. That's why I'm telling mine. The calls became shorter, the silences longer, and one night, after a quiet argument neither of us won, Evan said something that broke my heart without raising his voice. "Maybe love isn't enough if we're moving in opposite directions." I stared at my dark screen, realizing something terrifying. We were still in love, but we were starting to let go. The night Evan and I stopped talking didn't feel dramatic. No yelling, no tears on the call. Just a long pause that stretched until neither of us knew what to say anymore. "I think we should take a break," he said quietly. A break. A word that sounds temporary, but feels like a slow goodbye. I moved to Dallas 2 weeks later. New apartment, new job, new routine. On the outside, I looked fine, busy, motivated, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. On the inside, everything felt muted, like someone had turned the volume down on my life. I dated other people, or tried to. Dinner conversations felt shallow. Every time someone laughed, my mind compared it to Evan's. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped, stupidly, that it would be him. Months passed, then a year. One random evening, while cleaning out my inbox, I found an old email from him. A flight confirmation from our first trip together. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried like none of the progress mattered. If you've ever loved someone who changed you, you know how those feelings don't disappear, they wait. Quietly, patiently. That's why I share the story here. Because somewhere, someone is feeling the same ache and wondering if it ever really ends. I didn't expect Evan to come back into my life. But sometimes, love doesn't knock. Sometimes, it reappears when you least expect it. It was a Tuesday when Evan's name showed up on my phone. Not a text. A call. I stared at the screen until it almost stopped ringing. My heart pounded like it recognized him before my mind could catch up. When I finally answered, my voice barely worked. "Hi," he said. One word, and suddenly it was a year ago. And yesterday. And never. He told me he'd moved to Chicago. The startup failed. Life rerouted him the way it sometimes does when you're too busy planning. He didn't explain why he called right away. Neither did I ask. "I just missed you," he admitted. We talked for 2 hours like no time had passed. Like no pain had either. But underneath, every laugh was caution. We'd both been hurt by the same story. A month later, he came to Dallas for a conference. We met for coffee. This time, the hug was different. Softer. Slower. Like we knew what we were risking. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just wanted to see you." I nodded, even though my heart wanted to run ahead. Because love the second time around isn't about excitement. It's about fear. And whether you're brave enough to try anyway. Evan stayed in Dallas for 3 days. We took things slow, almost carefully, like touching something fragile you once broke. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks through quiet streets where the city lights softened everything. One night, sitting in my car outside his hotel, he finally said what we'd both been avoiding. "I don't want to do long distance again." Neither did I. "I can't go through that twice," I admitted. "It hurt too much." He nodded. "Then maybe we stop pretending this is casual." The truth was heavy between us. I'd built a life in Dallas. He was starting over in Chicago. Love was asking the same question again. Who moves? Days after he left, he sent me a message that made my hands shake. "I've been offered a job in Dallas. I haven't accepted yet." I sat on my couch, staring at the words. This time, it wasn't timing pulling us apart. It was choice. And choices are terrifying when the wrong one could cost you everything. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again. Because saying yes meant trusting love again. And saying no meant risking regret I might carry forever. I didn't reply to Evan right away. Instead, I went for a long drive, the kind where music plays but you don't really hear it. I thought about the girl I was when I first swiped right. Unsure, guarded, afraid of building a life around someone else. I wasn't her anymore. When I got home, I finally texted him. If you move here, it has to be because you want this life, not just me. He called immediately. That's exactly why I'd come, he said. I'm done running from what matters. A month later, Evan moved to Dallas. It wasn't a movie moment. No airport sprint. No dramatic music. Just him standing in my doorway with boxes and nervous eyes, asking, "Are we really doing this?" I said yes. Living together wasn't perfect. We argued about dishes, about space, about how fear still crept in on quiet nights. But we also built routines, Sunday mornings, shared grocery lists, laughter that felt earned. Still, love after heartbreak carries a shadow. And sometimes, late at night, I wondered, what if this was just a beautiful second chance? Not a forever. 2 years later, I stood alone on our apartment balcony, watching the Dallas skyline glow against the dark. Evan was inside, packing for a short work trip. Ordinary. Normal. The kind of life I once thought love would never give me. I used to believe happy endings arrived with certainty, with promises that never shook. But real love doesn't look like that. It looks like choosing someone even when the fear never fully leaves. Evan stepped behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Still thinking too much?" he asked softly. "Always," I smiled. He rested his forehead against mine. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I don't want to face it without you." And for the first time, that was enough. We never became perfect. We became honest. We became steady. We became two people who stopped running. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever loved, lost, and found your way back, thank you for listening. Some love stories aren't loud or dramatic. They're quiet. They last.